13:38 hours. Ahmedabad Tower logs a faint carrier wave at 118.3 megahertz. A fragment of sound, clipped, almost human, then static. The audio analyst would later slow it down. Enhance, filter. What emerges still chills everyone who hears it. No thrust, going dough, then silence. No coordinates, no tail number. Just the vanishing heartbeat of a transmission that should have lasted 10 seconds, and lasted less than one. At that same instant, Air India Flight 171 was only 300 feet above ground, still in takeoff climb, both engines roaring at 98% N1. Then, in less than 2 seconds, power collapsed. What the tower never heard, the black box later revealed. Mayday, mayday, we have no thrust. A calm, steady voice, clipped by failing electrics. The words vanished mid-sentence, swallowed by noise. For investigators, that missing half-second became the entry point to a riddle that would consume months. How could a transmission so urgent, so near, fail to reach? Why did the radios die at the same instant as the engines? And what invisible chain bound the two together? From the tower's perspective, the radar blip flickered once, then disappeared. Controllers thought it was a display glitch. They tried to re-establish contact. AI-171, Ahmedabad Tower, radio check. Nothing. Seconds later, a fireball rose beyond the perimeter wall. 242 souls aboard. A transmission that never landed. And a single question left echoing across the frequency bands of the world. What happened inside those 32 seconds between voice and silence? June 12, 2025. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport, Ahmedabad. Temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. Visibility, clear, 10 kilometers. On the apron, a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner prepped for Flight 171 to London Gatwick. A route flown hundreds of times, familiar, routine. At 13:38, the aircraft lined up on runway 23. 230 passengers, 12 crew, destination, westward, across the Arabian Sea, the Gulf, then Europe. A 10-hour flight, engines freshly serviced, clearance confirmed. That ripple marks where radar contact ended. From liftoff to loss of signal, 32 seconds. From thrust to silence, 7. Witnesses near the airfield boundary later recalled a strange sputter. A sound not like explosion, but absence. Engines winding down as if switched off mid-climb. Moments later, the jet clipped a building, the BJ Medical College hostel, erupting into flame. 241 lives lost on board, 19 on the ground, 1 survivor. Within hours, recovery teams extracted 2 black boxes from beneath fused debris, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. They would soon confirm what no one in the tower could have imagined. Both engines had lost thrust almost simultaneously, because both fuel control switches had moved to cutoff. Yet in the wreckage, the switches were later found in the run position, as if they had changed back. So what happened? Did the pilots touch them? Did the system misread a signal? Or did something deeper, unseen, electrical, ripple through the jet's nervous system in those 7 seconds of confusion? At the crash site, investigators found one more anomaly. The cockpit clock had stopped exactly at 13:38:42, the same second the tower recorded the ghost transmission. Coincidence or connection? To understand what silenced Air India 171, we must go beneath the surface, into the aircraft's core systems, where code meets current and control becomes interpretation. Because the question is no longer only why the engines died, but how silence itself became the final failure. To decode the mystery of Flight 171, investigators began not with the wreckage, but with the signal. The voice cut out at 13:38:42, exactly when both engines lost power, exactly when the tower's radio logs dipped into dead air. The crash wasn't just mechanical, it was digital. On a Boeing 787, thrust flows through layers of logic. Every lever, every switch, is no longer a direct mechanical command. It's an instruction translated by code. Between pilot and engine lies a gatekeeper, FADEC full authority, digital engine control. Two independent computers, each a brain the size of a shoebox, deciding how much fuel should flow, how quickly the turbines should spin. They're built to be infallible, but they speak in voltage, and voltage can lie. When investigators synced cockpit and flight data recorders, one pattern stood out. Both fuel control switches flipped to cutoff within 1.2 seconds of each other. Then, seconds later, both flipped back to run. Human hands? Possible, but improbable. The switches require a deliberate pull-lift-slide motion, guarded, resistant, intentional. No turbulence could trigger it, no brush of fabric or clipboard. And yet, both moved. One clue hides in the throttle module's electrical anatomy. Each switch sends its position through a data bus to the FADEC, and that bus shares its power with the radio amplifier and transponder. When the power drops, so does the voice. In simulation, a 120 millisecond power surge on that shared line is enough to make the FADEC misinterpret a signal. Run becomes cut off. The computer obeys the phantom command, starves the engines, and resets. For those 7 seconds, Flight 171 existed between two states, alive in physics, dead in logic. When power returned, the pilots had already reacted. Switches back to run, throttles forward. Relight sequence initiated. But the aircraft was now a few hundred feet above ground, airspeed bleeding away. Relight requires airflow, altitude, time. They had none. The system designed to protect the engines from runaway fuel flow had, under one improbable condition, protected them from thrust itself. And the moment the FADEC fell silent, so did the radios that depended on its power. The pilots called for help. The signal left the cockpit, but power collapsed before it could cross the airfield fence. Their last transmission, a mayday whispered into silence, wasn't ignored. It was erased. From that instant forward, everything the pilots did was correct. Checklists, relight, recovery. But by the math of altitude and time, they were flying a falling computer. The question now turns human. If the system can betray the pilot's command, how does a human respond to a machine that stopped listening? Every flight begins the same way. A checklist, a handshake, a voice confirming takeoff clearance. But for Air India 171, the voices would matter more than anything else, because in the end, they were the only things left behind. Captain Anil Vora, 48, First Officer Pradeep Menon, 37. Two men whose voices defined calm, the kind of composure that turns chaos into routine. Their exchange was steady, precise, comfortable. Rotate. Positive climb. Gear up. Then, a sound not listed on any checklist. A double click, like a camera shutter. Then a sudden change in tone, a low, hollow gasp from both engines as fuel flow died. The captain's voice now louder. No thrust. The first officer. Engine 1, Engine 2, both dead. He pulls the yoke. The nose lifts. Ground proximity alarms erupt. The captain reaches for the radio. A single click. Transmission begins. Mayday, mayday, we have no static. Carrier loss. The system fails mid-word. In the tower, the controller frowns. He glances at the signal board. It flickers. No error light, no return ping. He tries again. AI-171, radio check. No reply. Inside the aircraft, they try to relight. Fuel switches back to run. FADEC cycling. The right engine begins to spool. Too late. Altitude now below 200 feet. Ground proximity alarm blaring continuously. 31 seconds after takeoff, the Dreamliner clips the roof of a medical college hostel. Impact forces exceed survivability limits. And yet, one seat, 11A, remains wedged between two walls, upright. That seat belonged to Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, 34, returning home to London after visiting family in Gujarat. When he woke in the hospital 2 days later, his first words weren't about the crash. They were a question. Did they hear him? The investigators would tell him the truth. No one heard. The signal never made it through. That silence haunted the tower operators. One replayed the recording more than 100 times, listening, hoping to find something, anything hidden under the static, and buried deep in the spectrum at 118.3 megahertz, half a syllable surfaced. Go in doubt? The rest lost to noise. For families, that fragment became sacred. Proof that the pilots did call, that they fought, that they stayed calm to the very end. Between one frequency and the next, between data and faith, a human signal tried to survive. But machines speak in absolutes. Humans speak in echoes. And the voice that said Mayday still lingers there, trapped in that half second of missing spectrum. When the wreckage cooled and the data recorders were decoded, investigators faced a paradox. 2 engines, 2 fuel switches, both cut to cutoff in perfect symmetry, and then back to run. No warning, no human confirmation, no known precedent. Theories multiplied, each compelling, each incomplete. At first, engineers suspected the simplest culprit, a broken cam or spring inside the throttle control module. If vibration fractured the detent lock, the switch could slip into cutoff on its own. But post-crash metallurgical tests revealed no fracture. Springs intact, cam stable, no evidence of spontaneous motion, and the odds of both switches failing identically, 1 second apart, roughly 1 in a billion. Unless investigators thought the two weren't separate failures at all, but one shared trigger. Another team turned to the cockpit itself. Could the pilots have misreached? The 787's fuel switches sit just below the autopilot trim controls, almost identical in height and texture. A moment's confusion, a misplaced hand, and the engines starve. But listen to the cockpit voice recorder. There's no panic, no, "What did I do?" Only disbelief. "Why did you cut off?" "I did not." A calm argument, the kind born of trust. If either had moved the switch, the other would have seen it. Some theorized a dual input scenario, both reaching for adjacent controls, their motions overlapping just long enough to bypass the guard. But simulator tests show how unlikely that is. The guards resist, the switches don't yield easily, and still, both moved, precisely, simultaneously. The third theory looks not at hands, but code. Each engine's FADEC computer interprets those switch positions as digital bits. 1 for run, 0 for cutoff. If the signal line flickers, a transient spike could flip that bit, reversing the meaning. In 2024, a quiet service bulletin warned of just that: transient logic inversion under concurrent power source transition. Translation: when 2 power buses shift voltage at once, the system can momentarily misread pilot input. Run becomes cutoff. Flight 171's data log shows a 120 millisecond surge just before both engines died. Both FADEC units recorded fault reset at that exact timestamp. A microscopic arc, a single rogue electron, and 2 engines obeyed a phantom order. But software theory alone can't explain why the physical switches were later found back in run. Did the pilots move them? Did the FADEC command it? Or did the entire system reboot into a default run state as it fell? No answer yet. Only silence in the log. A blank 0.4-second gap before impact. 48 hours before takeoff, engineers replaced the throttle control module after a calibration fault. The replacement came from a 2017 batch known for microscopic solder fractures. Tiny filaments of tin, called whiskers, can grow between connectors, bridging circuits with a hair's width of metal. Investigators found traces of those whiskers in the recovered unit, enough to cause a momentary short, the kind that trips a voltage spike without leaving a burn mark. 1 filament, 1 instant, 1 surge, and a 240-ton aircraft dropped from the sky. No major crash escapes rumor. Online forums and tabloids claimed foreign interference, malware injection, intentional reset. But the investigation found no evidence, no external access, no modified code, no motive. Still, the idea lingers. If a laptop can update an airliner's firmware, could one line of corrupted code bring down a fleet? Maybe not this time. But the question itself haunts modern aviation. When control is code, who controls the code? 5 theories, 5 incomplete truths. Each fits the data until it doesn't. Somewhere in those 32 seconds lies the missing thread, a fragment of current that killed engines, silenced radios, and erased a human voice mid-word. The next clue didn't come from metal or software, but from time itself, the milliseconds where power, voice, and logic all died together. 2 months after the crash, investigators began to reassemble time itself. Every second of data from Air India 171 was spread across 5 terabytes. Engine metrics, voltage streams, control inputs, radio carrier traces. When the fragments were synchronized, a single pattern emerged. The precise moment everything failed. At 1338:42.2, a 28-volt bus feeding both the throttle quadrant and the VHF radio spiked to 43 volts for 120 milliseconds. A flicker invisible to the naked eye, but catastrophic to the logic boards reading those voltages as commands. The FADX systems, sensing incoherent data, did what they were designed to do: reset. And when they reset, they momentarily defaulted the fuel control valves to cutoff. That reset shut down thrust, cut electrical supply to the radios, and broke the very link that could have carried the mayday. A perfect feedback loop of silence. Within half a second, both switches were flipped back to run, manual correction by the crew. But the aircraft had already lost its climb rate. The engines began relight cycles, too low, too late. The electrical spike wasn't random. It originated in the right engine generator control unit, a MOSFET transistor showing microscopic arc damage, a defect invisible until it failed. When it did, it sent a pulse upstream through the common bus, a particle of metal thinner than a hair, a single electrical jump, rewrote both engines' understanding of fuel on versus fuel off. Physics overruled command. To verify the sequence, engineers ran dozens of simulations using identical parameters. Each time they injected a 0.12-second surge into the bus line, the same pattern repeated. Both FADX reset. Both fuel valves closed. Radio transmission power collapsed. Attempted relight lagged by 2.8 seconds. Even with flawless pilot reaction, no test aircraft regained lift. Every simulation ended in ground impact within 22 seconds. The conclusion was devastating. The pilots had done everything right. A separate team traced the faulty MOSFET back to a replacement throttle control unit fitted just 2 days before the crash. That part belonged to a 2017 production batch, later associated with micro-corrosion under humid storage. 2 service bulletins had warned of potential shorting under vibration. Neither inspection had been performed. Those whiskers measured less than 5 microns. But their effect was enormous. A bridge, a surge, a misread signal. One fragment of metal silencing 2 engines and 1 voice. Finally, forensic analysts revisited the tower's spectrum recordings, the same files dismissed months earlier as noise. Using harmonic reconstruction, they recovered 0.64 seconds of the pilot's last transmission. A whisper through distortion. Mayday, mayday. No thrust going down. Then, an abrupt drop in carrier amplitude, the moment both engines and radios died together. The final call was sent, but physics erased it before reception. No one ignored it. It simply vanished in transit. Weeks later, the sole survivor, Vishwas Ramesh, asked investigators a single question. Did they hear him? When they told him no, he wept. Not because of the answer, but because he remembered the captain's voice in those last seconds. Clear, calm, undistorted, speaking into a void. After months of modeling, the sequence became undeniable. A fractional surge, a dual system reset, a silenced transmission. No sabotage, no pilot error. Just one invisible glitch in the chain of certainty. If one rogue electron could collapse a Dreamliner's entire logic tree, what else in the sky depends on silence staying quiet? By the end of summer 2025, the final reconstruction of Air India 171 was complete. Thousands of pages of voltage traces, algorithm flowcharts, and cockpit transcripts distilled to one improbable truth. The system failed not by design, but by interpretation. A surge lasting less than the blink of an eye. A signal mistaken for an order. Two engines obeyed a phantom voice, while the real one, the pilot's, went unheard. Every modern aircraft is a dialogue between human intention and machine logic, between muscle and code. Flight 171 proved how fragile that dialogue can be. The pilots followed procedure perfectly. The computers followed theirs. But the bridge between them, a single line of current, collapsed. And when it did, the hierarchy inverted. Humans became observers of a system no longer listening. For families, the crash wasn't an equation of voltage and logic. It was absence. Calls unanswered. Voices missing from dinner tables. They still ask what the captain might have felt in those last seconds of fading power. Was he afraid, angry, or simply focused on one task, to speak even as the system went dark? In aviation schools now, instructors replay that final transmission fragment, not as warning, but as tribute. Mayday, mayday, no thrust, going down. A half sentence that represents an entire profession's trust in the machines built to listen. In the months that followed, manufacturers and regulators launched fleet-wide software audits. Every FADEC firmware version, every generator bus design, every data pathway between power and radio, retested, rewritten, fortified. But a question still shadows every redesign. How much control should humans surrender to systems that can outpace their understanding? The paradox of safety. As we make machines smarter, we make ourselves slower in comparison. Who commands a cockpit when commands themselves become data points? For decades, aviation promised redundancy, every system backed by another. But redundancy means little if all backups share the same assumption. Flight 171 exposed a deeper fragility, our trust in the invisible. In code we can't see, in electrons we can't feel, in silence we interpret as safety. If one unseen surge can silence a jet midair, what does that say about the networks guiding thousands each day? The grids, the satellites, the algorithms that learn faster than their creators. The question is no longer what failed, but whether we'll recognize the next whisper of failure before it disappears into static. Where the wreckage once burned, a small memorial now faces west. No grand monument, no names carved in marble. Only a sentence, etched in both Hindi and English. We called. The sky did not answer. Maybe the true legacy of Flight 171 isn't about what failed, but what endured. The need to listen harder, to doubt certainty, to respect the silence between signals. Because every flight, every system, every life still depends on one unanswered question. Can the sky hear us when we call?